and Alyssa, who will provide live ASL interpretation for this morning's session. Closed captioning is also enabled and available to you. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you this year's Maryland Statewide Circulation Conference keynote speaker, Emma Karin Erickson, who's the Senior Young Adult Librarian at the Brooklyn Public Library in New York. Emma Karin is an activist academic whose personal and professional life is driven by a commitment to social justice. Believing deeply in people over property and profit, she sees libraries as a place of liberation. She most recently finished teaching the Library Juice Academy course, Crit Lead, Practicing Critical Librarianship from Positions of Power, and is currently working on a toolkit to support information workers engaging in critical reflective practice. Emma Karin also presented on building empathy earlier this month at the Urban Libraries Conference. When brainstorming for a keynote speaker, our team really wanted to build upon the previous topics that we've had, like relationship-focused service and trauma-informed practice. And we hope that this keynote refocuses your energy and that you leave with more tools to build empathy. We are excited and grateful to have her join us today. Please welcome Emma Karin.
Hi, everyone. All right, I am going to set up and share my screen, and then we'll get started. Okay, hopefully you can all see. Looking good. All right, let's get into it. So hello and welcome not only to the Maryland Statewide Circulation Conference, but also to my presentation, Uh-Oh People, Building Your Empathy Muscles, which I now wish I had called Uh-Oh People, Working with the Public, because we're going to cover way more than just empathy today. The human aspect of library work can be, at the worst of times, exhausting. And it can be really complicated, and it can be really triggering and demoralizing, right? But it can also be the most rewarding aspect of our jobs. I know for me, I get a really big sense of pride when I can help find someone like exactly what it was they were looking for, whether it's like the perfect book or it's some, government form on a website that's impossible to navigate. And I know my whole body just like fills with sunshine when I get to give like the littlest patron their first library card. It's like, whew, nothing makes me feel better. And because we're at the Maryland Statewide Circulation Conference, when I say people, I'm going to primarily mean our patrons and our coworkers, but all of this information will support you outside of your branches when dealing with everybody from your friends to the supermarket checkout person. And I do want to say that if I do slip up and say librarian, please know that what I really mean is a library worker. And with that, I will actually fully introduce myself. My name is Emma Karin Erickson. Emma or Emma Karin are both correct to be used for my first name. I use she, her, and hers pronouns. And as mentioned, my day job is as a senior young adult librarian for the Brooklyn Public Library. My work is very fulfilling, but it is not the only part of who I am. I'm also a zine maker, and I organize with the Prison Library Support Network. I enjoy making things with my hands, including sewing, crocheting, and gardening, neither of which I'm super good at, but I love to do it anyway. My favorite movies are musicals and comedies from the 1930s and 40s. My favorite musical artist of all time is Aretha Franklin. Just no one compares. And I'm also a trauma survivor and have multiple invisible illnesses. And I also want to jump on this morning's question because my humble brag recently has been that I'm the keynote for this really amazing conference. And I'm just like beyond thrilled and excited that I get to have the opportunity to be in conversation with you all today. I also really want to say I am not perfect, nor am I an expert on any of the things I'm going to talk about. Everything that I share today is going to be built off of the research and the work of other people and countless mistakes that I have made and the willingness to admit that I don't know everything. I'm always working on myself. I'm always listening and open to learning. I hope that you will reach out to me after this presentation if you have maybe questions or you want to share your experiences or you want to give feedback or really anything. My email inbox is truly always open. So these are some links to my personal website, my Etsy shop, where you can buy my zines if you're into it, and to the Prison Library Support Network webpage to learn more about that work, and you maybe even get involved in it because most of it is virtual, so you can do it anywhere in the country, really. So hopefully, I think someone has dropped those links in the chat, and if not, we'll definitely get to it at the end. So next. Some of you may have guessed that the title from this session comes from a TikTok that made the rounds during the pandemic. And for those of you who can't see the video, it's of a little white boy. He's probably around like maybe 3 or 4, blonde hair, blue shorts, and a black and white and maybe brown, I think, striped t-shirt. They're on the street with his caregiver, and when they see some people outside. In the corner, there's some text that says, "Everyone on Earth trying to get away from everybody else right now, #quarantine 2020. And I'm going to play the clip right now.
What are you running from?
The people.
You're running from the people? How come?
Because uh-oh,
What?
people.
Oh no, people.
I've seen that video 100 times now, and every time it is just cuter and cuter. His reaction is one that I think a lot of us have when we encounter the public on a daily basis, whether at work or just existing. We just kind of want to yell and run away and get out of the situation as quickly as possible, because people can be difficult, right? And they can be really rude. They can also be inconsiderate. Sometimes we might think they're really stupid. They can be just like totally exasperating, and they frustrate us. They can make our jobs and our lives harder. It's a really common feeling and oftentimes totally appropriate. But when we start initially with this negative mindset, we can have really poor interactions with people that are just harder than they need to be for them and for us. If this is our instinctive mindset, it can hinder us when we need to try to be patient and present with people. If we could instead instinctively recognize that people are not just difficult, they're complex. And maybe someone isn't trying to be rude, they're just so tired. And maybe they're not stupid, they just haven't been in a library in a while. And because they don't work there, they need help, right, with like a task that we think is simple. I have checkout machines at my branch, and I have to take a really deep breath when helping someone use it, because for me, I say, oh, how can you not know? But I deal with it every day. This might be the first time that they've ever encountered it, so they don't know which way to put their library card. That's not on them. That's just the situation. So entering that calmly, instead of getting frustrated that, oh, why can't you do this? I can understand where they come from and help make the interaction better. So people are more than just one thing, and often they're going to be more than the first impression we get of them, right? In my introduction, I wanted to share with you beyond what my job title is, because I'm so much more than my job, and I'm so much more than what you can see from the outside. Often our interactions with the public and sometimes our coworkers can really be like very quick and surface level. We don't take time to even humanize them. We just see them as like, oh, you're a problem I have to solve, or you're a question that I have to answer. But if we can change our mindset and see the people that we interact with as more than what we see on the surface, and consider that they are probably just trying their best, we can have easier, better, and more rewarding interactions with people. So next, I want to have us do a group exercise, and I want everyone to take a breath and pause and think about a time when a person made you, maybe you visibly flinched, or you shuddered, you felt uncomfortable, maybe you even turned up your nose at them, or you kind of like rolled your eyes, you gave a big deep sigh when they were talking to you or coming up to you, or maybe you even walked in a different direction, right? You crossed the street or moved, you did like a big, loop around to not be around them. And this is all before you even interacted with them, right? Maybe you hadn't even talked to them yet. They hadn't even come up to you yet. And I want you to take a second and to visualize that person maybe where you were, and just to sit with that image for a second. So some of you may have thought of a homeless person or a group of teenagers. Maybe it was a person of color or just someone with a darker complexion than yours. Maybe it was someone from a different social class or culture or subculture that you don't know that much about. We all have unconscious and conscious bias deep within us that, like empathy, we're not born with. We learn it through society and relationships to our friends and our family, through the privileges that we have, through media representations and the culture that we're raised in. We're all products of our lived experiences, both the good and the bad, and the stuff that we can notice and the stuff that we maybe don't really notice because it's just the water in which we're swimming in. Now, biases can be unlearned with practice and patience, but first, we have to acknowledge that we have them. We have to recognize where they come from. We all really have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and also being unsure, right? Like I said, we don't know everything. It's impossible to know everything. But if we can embrace that discomfort and being unsure and not knowing, and this is going to put us in a place where we can embrace learning and then transform ourselves, change ourselves and the way that we exist and the way that we work. To aid in that unlearning, we can practice empathy. Empathy is made up of two different parts. So there's the emotional part, where you kind of feel another person's feelings. I think that's the one we most typically think of. But there's also the other part is the cognitive, where we understand their perspective. And it can be applied two different ways. So the main one that we engage with is interpersonally. So that's like on an individual level with small groups. But then there's also socially, and this is going to be like a deeper, broader application that involves understanding a historical context of a group's experiences, even if you don't interact with them on a daily basis. So it's like right now, me thinking of and having compassion for all of the people in Puerto Rico who have suffered from the devastation of the hurricane. I don't know them personally, but I am trying to feel empathy and use that as a way to think about how maybe they would want to be helped. That's going to be an example of social empathy. So the second part of this presentation is building your empathy muscles, because as I mentioned before, empathy is not going to be something that we're really born with. It's something we work at. So how are we going to do that? How do we learn empathy? How do we practice it? How do we engage it? Well, we're going to start with you, because you, my friend, are the most important thing. You are beautiful and you are special, and we all truly deserve a gold star for simply existing in the harsh reality of the world that we live in. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't use a little polishing up, right? We could all be doing a little bit better in some aspect of our lives. And it's important to remember that empathy is not about other people. It's about you. It's about how you react to someone, about how you handle a situation. One thing that I have learned over and over again is that we cannot set out to make the world a better place if we can't work on ourselves. Many spaces that I have been in and people I've tried to work with have failed because they're unable to admit that they needed help, or they were not practicing what they preached. I'm not always great at it myself, but there's a difference between not doing it at all and being able to acknowledge that you need some help. So one set of skills that everybody can always be working on is their emotional intelligence. And this is going to help support us when we're working to be more empathetic and working with people. So emotional intelligence is made up of 6 components. The first is self-awareness, so recognizing and understanding your own emotions. Self-regulation, managing your emotions. self-motivation, setting standards for yourself and working towards goals, social awareness, the ability to consider other people's perspectives, that's empathy, and social skills, which is the ability to interact with other people. And some of these might seem kind of separate, but they are all really deeply connected and symbiotic. If you work on one, you'll find that you're kind of working on another. And if you neglect one, the others are going to suffer too. But these are the things that are inside of us that will help us be better and work better with others. So now I'm going to go into some tools that I've used to help me work on my emotional intelligence. I'm going to go more in depth with some of them, but because I don't have you here for 7 hours, thankfully, I won't be able to get to everything. And I have included these resources at the end of the presentation. They're not in full citation format, but hopefully you'll be able to get to them. But they're also going to be all available in my Padlet, which hopefully someone will drop the link to in the chat right now. And if you've never heard of Padlet before, it's super cool. It's essentially like a virtual bulletin board where you can post different types of media and have access to it, so others can have access to it, and you can interact with it, right? So you can like posts, you can leave comment, and I'm pretty sure that I gave everybody permission to be able to add posts to the board, which is cool. So if you've got a really great resource or an article that you think everybody else who has this Padlet link to should be able to have access to, please add it. I want everything to be a conversation, including my resource document. So first thing we're going to talk about is what are your values and how are you living them? So our beliefs are the ideology that helps us to interpret everyday life. They're expressed in our values that kind of act as standards to help guide us. And our values and our beliefs grow and expand throughout our lives, shaped by our experiences, our education, our relationships. They're going to determine our attitudes and how we interact with people. They're so important, and yet we rarely really take purposeful time to kind of interrogate what are my beliefs, what are my values. So something that I've created is this values exercise worksheet, which I've given everybody access to in the Padlet. It aims to not only help you determine your personal values, but it goes a couple extra steps. So one is that it asks you to put your values, once you sort of narrow them down, into what I've called values in action statements, to give you a better understanding of what your values look like as attitudes. Like, how do you practice a value once you've figured it out, what it is? The worksheet is great. It also includes instructions for how to use the activity to determine work values, because sometimes they can be different, but sometimes they can overlap. And there's a lot of reflection questions, or not a lot, there's like maybe 8 reflection questions at the end of the worksheet that I want to encourage you to think deeper on the values and how you are or are not living them. And this worksheet is not meant to be done just like one time and then you never think about it again. I actually just did it recently. I've tried to do it maybe once a year just to see if anything changes, if I'm noticing any shifts in what is important to me. So you can do it as many times as you want. So I talked about getting to know your emotions, and this is going to be one of the most important things that we can do for ourselves that really actually supports the needs of others. And this is when we figure out our own emotions, we can then learn that second part about like how to regulate them and how to work on them. So these are 2 tools that can help you dive deeper into naming your emotions and can support us in determining kind of where they stem from. These tools are typically used by clinicians in like more of a formal therapy session, but you can absolutely use them on your own. The first one that looks a little more spiky is Dr. Robert Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions. So this is going to show different intensities of our emotions, so how it can start at one place and then escalate. And it also shows the relationship between 2 emotions. So the example of like, you can feel joy and you can feel trust, and how this can then be expressed as the feeling of love or being loved. And he's got a whole theory of emotions, which I won't dwell on, but all of it is linked for your own reading after the presentation. The feelings wheel by Dr. Gloria Wilcox, the one on the other side, is one I use more often to help me define the exact feeling that I'm feeling, because I am very guilty when someone says, "What's wrong?" I just say, I'm sad, I'm feeling sad today, because it feels easier and simpler. But I'm actually doing myself a disservice when I don't truly acknowledge what I'm actually feeling, because maybe it's really, I'm feeling lonely. And if I don't admit that I'm feeling lonely and I don't tell someone else that I'm feeling lonely, how are we actually going to help the core problem here, right? If I can't tell someone honestly how I'm feeling, how am I going to have an honest solution to that feeling there? And when we're more in touch with our emotions, we can help others try to define theirs. So if we, see someone and we assume that they're mad when they have like an outburst, if we can actually figure out, oh, I think they're actually feeling really frustrated, then you can offer the solutions that ease the frustration that they're feeling. Or maybe their outburst will realize, oh, actually they've really been hurt by something that someone has said, and we can find ways to soothe and remedy that situation. So by understanding the emotions we have and others have, we can come at a problem from a different angle and hopefully have an actual better result. The buzziest of buzzwords, self-care. So for those of you who may not know, the concept of self-care actually comes from Audre Lorde, who wrote, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgent, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare." I have yet to hear a better explanation of that quote than the one Yvette Dion gave in an article for Ravishly a year ago. She said that saying you matter, that you come first, and that what you need and want matters is a radical act, because it goes against everything that we've been conditioned to believe. Both writers are speaking from their experiences as Black women, and it is imperative that we do not forget that a Black lesbian woman coined this concept, and understand that it is far more than just face masks and treating yourself, which I'm not knocking. I love a face mask and I love a treat, but we need to understand that it's deeper than this surface level that the term has kind of been co-opted into being. Because self-care is really, it's taking care of your body by taking your vacation days to recharge, right? And using your sick days if you don't feel good. If you don't feel good, stay home, take care of yourself. And it's taking care of your brain by sometimes saying no, by breathing deeply, and maybe removing yourself from a bad situation that you're in, whatever it could be. And it's taking care of your soul by spending quality time with your friends and loved ones. Self-care is something that you must do because, as I mentioned before, you are the most important thing, truly. And you cannot be kind and give to others if you're not first kind and giving to yourself. So having a self-care plan can really help when that little voice says like, oh, I don't have time to take a break, and I've got more resources for you at the end in the Padlet to help you craft your own self-care plan. There's one that's an activity that I designed, and then this really excellent, very in-depth webpage from the University of Buffalo. But for self-care, essentially be flexible and find what works for you. I cannot meditate. I have tried so many times with different apps and classes, and it's just, I can't do it. It's something that I have had difficult time for. However, I can sit outside and look at the clouds and kind of let my mind go blank and check in with my body. And that's very similar. That's finding what's worked for me instead of being like, oh, I got to meditate, I have to do this thing. That's not what it's about. You got to find what works for you and what makes you feel good, because that's what self-care is about. You want to practice self-love and compassion, and that could be those like face masks, taking the time for yourself, but it could also be, for me, I have some body pain issues, and sometimes I wake up and I feel so frustrated and I can't think I'm going to get through the day. And then when I get home, I literally give myself a hug and I say, thank you for getting me through another day, because I need to learn to love my body for all of its abilities and disabilities. Clear and consistent boundaries and learning to say no is a very important part of self-care. And I'm actually going to talk about that in the next slide. Another is asking for help when you need it. I am not great at this, but I'm really learning. And it's helpful when you connect it to the second piece, which is maintaining connections with people and building support systems and community. And that could be, your internal community at your, where you work, or internal community with colleagues, or it should also be your community outside. You want to have a life outside of your job, whether it's a crochet, knitting group, crafting circle, or I heard someone 7 book clubs, like whatever your community is, make sure that you have those and know the people in there that you could reach out to if you needed for help. And then most importantly, take care of those basics, hydrate, drink water. I'm going to take a sip right now. You also want to eat to nourish yourself, whatever that looks like, and try to breathe and take time to pause. And that could be just like taking a break, but also making sure that, you're getting your 7 or 8 hours of sleep a night. So I think a really important piece of how we interact with people is going to take on different forms, including how we preserve ourselves by not engaging, by not interacting with someone. And I had a really hard time setting boundaries because it took me a really long time to figure out what they actually were. Like, I think I just kept hearing this word and I was like, a boundary, but it's like an invisible thing, but I'm thinking of like a physical, blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't just see what they looked like, and especially at work. So I hope that you will learn here. These are some of the things that I've learned how to say and things to do. And I hope this will set you on your path to creating and setting strong boundaries for yourself in your personal life and at work. These mostly focus on work, but they can definitely translate over. So a thing to say, I can't help you with this. This could be maybe, there's your children's librarian comes up and says, I can't do story time today. Can you do it? And the thought of reading a book in front of a group of toddlers and their parents just absolutely sends you into shock waves. Or maybe you're just busy, right? Maybe you've got a lot of other things going on and you can't. It's okay to say, I can't help you with this. It's not your responsibility to take on everything, especially if you don't want to, or you can't, or any other reason. Another way to phrase this, and especially this is maybe more working with the public, is I'm not the right person to speak with about this. Let me find someone else to help you. I use variations of this work often in retail settings. When I was clearly not giving someone the answer that they were looking for, and they were getting frustrated with me and I was getting frustrated with them, I would say, you know what, I don't think that I'm assisting you in the way that you need. Let me see if I can find someone else. And you call in that refreshment, right? And you say, maybe this person has more energy, or they have more knowledge, they have more information. Maybe they're the better person to help with this situation. A real basic one, but one that I think a lot of us, we really skirt that line. I will not be answering emails or phone calls while I'm on vacation, while I'm out sick, or, after I clock out. It's really easy for us now, right? We're so available. You can email, you can text, you can phone call, you can Slack chat, you can Google chat. There's so many ways to get a hold of a person. It can be hard to shut down and really tell people, nope, I'm not going to look at it, because that little bing goes off, right? And we're like, oh, what could it be? But it's important for us to clock out. When we're done, and separating ourselves from our jobs so that we have time to take care of ourselves, to do the things we want to do, and find that balance between the work us and the home us. Another boundary is also just physical boundaries, right? So asking people, can you take a step back, please? I think we got a little better about this in the pandemic when we want everyone to stay 6 feet away, but it's still important, I don't want people coming into my personal space. I now also don't really like shaking hands with people. So sometimes I'll say, someone puts their hand out and I say, oh, I don't shake hands, but I can give you a fist bump or an elbow tap if you want. Because that's my personal space and that's fine. That's an acceptable boundary to set up. So this last one here doesn't maybe feel like a boundary, but it is a line that I hope you will take with you into your lives, because it is one that has helped me immensely in public library work. So if you can tell from this, I have quite a bit of tattoos. I also am a female. So people often love to compliment me or engage me in questions about my tattoos or my appearance. And sometimes if I'm feeling it, I'll engage, but most often I just say, do you have a library related question? Because I'm at work and I'm not here to talk about my body. I'm not here to talk about me, my physical presentation. I'm here to help you with a library related question. This also helps if you've got, those patrons who just won't stop asking you out on a date. Do you have a library related question? It shuts a conversation down pretty quickly, especially if they don't stop, they keep going. You just say, I can't answer that. Do you have a library related question? I can only help you if you have a library related question. Is there a library related question that I could answer for you? Otherwise, I'm going to need to help the next patron. It's really simple, but I do find it effective. Obviously, there are some people who they're just not going to be shut down, but that'll be discussed a little bit later. Some things to remember too, setting up boundaries. Your personal value as a human being is not defined by your work performance. It's a difficult thing to remember now, but it is true. You also want to be clear, consistent, and direct in your communication. So don't say one thing to one person and then another thing to another, because it makes the boundary feel, wavering. And we want to have nice, strong boundaries to make sure that you are getting whatever it is that you need and you're not getting whatever it is that you don't want. And then plan your response to a boundary being crossed. So I know that if I tell someone, do you have a library related question? And they just keep coming at me, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go get my supervisor. That's my plan for if someone crosses my boundary. There are important kind of contingency plans. What are you going to do if X, Y, and Z doesn't work? Okay, so how do we work on that social awareness aspect of emotional intelligence? How do we engage in empathy? The first most important thing is to be always and consciously checking our biases, our privileges, and the power that we have over people. I know we often feel powerless when we're behind the circulation or reference or customer service desk, whatever, I know it's called different things everywhere, but we do have a type of power over the people who come into the library space. We have the power in our workplaces because, we know where things are. We know how things work. We can either help someone or we can choose not to. And it's important to acknowledge that power and recognize it when we ignite it. And sometimes for good, but oftentimes for bad, right? So a good example could be if your library system, I'm not sure, actually I should have checked, if you still have fines and maybe you waive a fine for someone. That's an example of a good power that we have. But a bad power could be that you get, you have a patron who you just don't want to deal with, and so you call security and have them escort that person out. Those are examples of power that we have over people in our library setting. Another is learn about the populations you serve, which feels like, the most basic kind of tenant, commandment, whatever you want to call it, of library work. But we don't always do it thoughtfully and thoroughly, because outreach is really hard. It can be a lot of unanswered emails and dead-end voicemails, but it is really worth it. And the best piece of advice that I can give to you for both outreach and learning about the people you serve is to meet them where they're at. So see if you can get time to go to a community board meeting, or maybe there's like a mommy meetup group that you know about, and they'll let you go. Ask first sometimes if you can go. If there's like a cultural fair or festival, maybe a religious festival that you could attend, and go, bring your flyers and just, wave, talk to people, because you don't want to have the first meeting asking people to come to you. You want to show that you are willing to put an effort and go visit them. And, don't expect them to do all of the work, essentially. And then hopefully once you go to them, they'll want to come to you. And when they do, be genuine and curious about them. So ask questions and then listen. Let them speak and share what they have to say, even if it goes on for a little bit longer than you can kind of stand. Let them get it out. Let them talk. And let them lead the conversation. Don't make it all about you. And next, a really important piece of empathy is like reframing. So learning to adjust your mindset and seeing something from a different angle. Remember, right, you might see someone as being really rude or irritating, but they may just be really tired and really frustrated at something that happened before they even came into your library setting. And maybe their rudeness probably isn't about you, right? It's really hard to not take everything personally. 8 times out of 10, it is not about you. So this is where we have to practice not letting someone else's emotions become our own. That's a big part of empathy, right? You want to feel what someone else is feeling, but you don't want it to like take over you. So someone is kind of, being nasty and irritating to you, you might kind of start to feel that like, oh, well, I'm going to be nasty to them back. Don't. Trust me, it is not going to make the situation any easier for you or for them. Obviously, right, putting yourself aside and trying to understand someone else's perspective is going to be the hallmark of empathy. But what does it mean, right? What does it mean to like walk in another's shoes? So here's an example that if most of you are working in public settings, this situation might be somewhat familiar. There is a homeless person who has come into the branch, and a patron or a coworker considers this to be a problem that needs to be dealt with. And your instinct might be to agree that the homeless person should not be in the library because maybe you think that they're going to smell, or maybe they have too many bags with them, or that you have this feeling that they're going to be difficult. And really, like, what reason do they have to be in the library anyway? You might want to ask them to leave, or worse, you might call over a security guard to ask them to leave. But if you just take a moment and try to imagine, what is the difficulty of finding a shower if you did not have a home and you had no friends' houses to go to? Consider maybe what you might think of as precious or useful if you had no possessions to your name, and how you would always keep them with you if you thought that someone might steal them or throw them away if you left them somewhere. Remind yourselves that most shelters are very violent spaces, and they make people leave in the morning. So this person maybe just needs to get out of the sun for a minute. And then take a moment and look, and you'll realize they're not harming anybody or causing a disturbance maybe to the basic functions of the library, right? They're just there. Often we dehumanize groups like the homeless because we cannot fathom this experience, and seeing it makes us uncomfortable. So this is why we treat them as maybe below us or something to get rid of, something we don't want to see or look at, because then it doesn't exist, right? And then it isn't a problem that we have to worry about. But taking time to understand someone's situation, the realities of their lived experience, and being non-judgmental, you can respond to your coworker or the patron that everyone has a right to be in the library and use its resources. And for added measure, you can remind them that every human being deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, period. Serving diverse needs. This is a whole college course, so there's not enough time to go into detail about everything, but I hope that these sparse bullet points can give you a place to start when interacting with someone who has a different lived experience than you. So the first, exercise patience. Breathe deep when you start to feel some frustration. Don't rush people. If they got to talk, let them get it out. Might be the only person who listens to them that day. And practice. Recognize you're not going to be perfect the first time or the second time, or maybe even the third time, and learn from your mistakes. Be consistent, right? When you're trying to learn something new, make sure you're doing it every single time. And have some humility, right? I recognize in the beginning of this program, I don't know everything. It's impossible to know everything. And be truly open to learning and listening and getting understanding new perspectives and experiences. This is a big one here too. So don't assume, and don't assume maybe someone's experiences or their intelligences or their abilities. A good example of this is sometimes I have to help people at the computer, right? I'm sure we all do. And I don't know what they know, because I'm not going to ask them, what do you know about a computer? Instead, I'll maybe say, can you show me what you did? And then I can maybe see the point where there's some issues. Or if I explain something, I say, at the end, I say, does that make sense to you? Because I want to check in. I don't know what they know. I don't know what they don't know. And also in terms of assumptions, don't assume that just because you don't see it doesn't mean that it isn't happening. So a good example of this is I worked at a branch where they were saying, oh, there's, you don't need to do a program about teen pregnancy. We don't have any pregnant teens in this neighborhood. And I thought to myself, that you know of, they maybe don't come into the branch all of the time, but they could be there. And if we don't have, supports or understand what they're going through, how can we help them when they do come in looking for information? Which is going to lead us to have your resources ready. So know what your system-wide offers, know what's in your collection, what's in your physical branch, what books do you have on the shelves, what resources do you have available. If you do have to make a referral to a service, try making the call first if you can, just in case maybe the line is dead, or you have to leave a voicemail or something. Don't just write something down and hand it to someone and hope that it works out. If you have the time, kind of go that extra step and make sure that what you're giving them is the right piece of information. Having resources in multiple languages, and this gets back to knowing your community. So we have a big Bangladesh community where I work, so we have to have library card applications in Bangla, so that is helpful for them. And then know services exist not only in your neighborhood, but in your county and in your state. I live in New York City, and something that we forget all the time is that New York City is a part of New York State. And a lot of the state resources can assist people living in the city. So you want to know what's available, not just immediately close by, but in the bigger picture. And then do your homework. And this comes down to finding maybe first-person accounts, have conversations with people, find voices that are not being represented in mainstream media. And then when you do research your issues, do your diligence there, Check on the sources, check the statistic sizes, all of those good information literacy pieces out there so that you make sure that the information you're getting is correct and has all of the correct information there. So we're winding down, and the final tool that I really want to leave you with is critical reflective practice. This is going to support and sustain all of the other work and all of the other things that I've talked about today. If there's nothing else you take away, please take this. Critical reflective practice is a process of personal inquiry in which the goal is to unearth, examine, and discover, and change the assumptions that influence how you engage with the world. So that's my definition. And a second good definition, I think, that goes beyond that is critical reflection is a meaning-making process that helps us set goals, use what we've learned in the past to inform future actions, and consider the real-life implications of our thinking. It is the link between thinking and doing, and at its best, it can be transformative. And what they mean by transformative, is it can change us, it can make us better, it can make us do different, better things. So why would you do this? Well, critical reflective practice is going to help reduce this gap between what we say is theory and practice. So the idea of what we say and what we do. A really good example of this is people saying that they are anti-racist. It is a great thing to say. It is a great thing to be. But how are you being anti-racist? Are you making sure that the book displays that you have are representative of Black voices? Are you making sure that when someone makes a remark that you get in there and you have a conversation and help to talk with and educate that person, especially if you're white? Are you donating to organizations that support different anti-racist causes? Are you opting to step back and let a person of color speak before you speak? That is how you are being actively anti-racist. In critical reflective theory, it's going to hold us accountable, and it's going to help us to do this inner work that we need to do to say, am I doing what it is that I'm saying? It's a good thing to pair with the values worksheet. Am I really living and expressing the values that I've believed in? And it's going to help us to be better for ourselves personally and to be better with the people that we're going to interact with. So when are we going to engage in critical reflective practice? So you can do it on, reflect on just a specific day. You could reflect on as a week. You could reflect on a month or even a whole year overall. It can be, very big picture, very minute. It could be when something happens and how a situation is handled and whether you're involved or not. I reflect often on things that I see and things that I'm interpreting. You can reflect on your workplace, your institution, your branch as a whole. You can reflect when you learn something new. So you could do some critical reflection on this whole conference or my keynote or anything. And we're going to reflect. There's a couple of different ways you can do it. The most basic is just write it down. And that could be in a, journal, on a scrap of paper, back of a napkin, or, in a Word document, a Google Doc, a blog, if you want to have something, but just getting to, physically down on something. I was going to say paper, but digital paper. You could talk to yourself, which sounds silly, but it's actually something that I do a lot. You could use maybe voice memos, on your phone, or just have internal conversations, which is usually how I do it. Something will happen and I'll kind of go through the reflection in my head first, and then go back and then kind of write it down so I don't forget the things that I've reflected on. You can talk with your friends, your coworkers, your colleagues, and this could be, kind of informally, or you could create a formal critical reflection discussion group where maybe, you each go through and talk about something that you want to reflect on, you reflect together, you read something, reflect on it. It can be as, formal and as rigid as you want, or it can be a little bit more flexible. To engage in critical reflective practice, there's a couple of steps. First, you're going to very sort of, I would say, emotionlessly describe what happened. And then the next part is to examine, any biases you might have had, privileges that were engaged, power dynamics that happened, and then draw conclusions. So, did I say this thing because I was white and they were a person of color? Did I act this way because I was exercising power over another person? And the final step is going to be the most important, and this is going to be where you make your action plan. So this is, what do you maybe need to learn more about? What do you need to investigate further? And what are you going to do differently the next time something similar happens? Critical reflective practice, it sounds so very like high and mighty and very lofty. And it is meant, comes from the academic world. But one of my favorite examples of critical reflective practice that I engaged in was I was noticing that I was becoming unbearable at around 3 o'clock when I was on the desk. I was like short with patrons. I had no patience. There was definitely a lot of like eye rolling and like, just like it was not good. And I had to say, Emma, what's going on here? This is like so odd. It's like clearly it's a 3 o'clock thing. What's going on? And 3 o'clock is one of the busiest times at our branch. It's when most of our teens come in. So it's when I kind of need to be at my best. And I went through reflection and I thought about it and I realized, oh, I'm really hangry. My blood sugar is clearly low. It starts to probably, I have lunch maybe at 1 or 2 or 12 or 1. And then right around 3 p.m., I kind of dip down a little bit and I'm really hungry. And that's what's going on here. So I was able to make a plan and say, okay, at 2:30, I got to have a little snack or bring something with me on the desk. And then every time I can sort of start to feel myself like getting that little on edge around 3 o'clock, I just have to take a breath and say, I'm hangry right now. This is not who I am normally. I can fix the situation. I can be better and kind of move forward from there. So it doesn't have, I want you to use it to check your biases and your privilege and all of those things. But sometimes the critical reflective practice is just helping you to check in with your body and make sure that you're being your best. So some of you now have, I have hope, listened, you've learned, but something might be in the back of your head. You're wondering, do I have to do this? Is this part of my job? Is this in my job description? And the answer is yes. All information jobs are customer service based, and information jobs can be anything from working with data sets to archives to academic libraries, public libraries. All of that is information jobs. We exist, information workers exist to help people. We serve people, working with people, ensuring that they have the best experience and that they leave with whatever it was that they came in looking for, even if it's just to find the bathroom. Is part of our jobs. You can maybe even go back, and look at your job description. It might even say somewhere, customer service, working with people. We don't have libraries just to warehouse stuff, right? We have them so that people will come in and use the information and resources that we have. So yes, this is part of your job. And learning how to have better interactions so that patrons leave feeling satisfied is part of our jobs, but there's going to be so many other reasons that you want to do it. The biggest one being that, in case you haven't noticed, the world is a very difficult and sometimes terrible and terrifying place. And we can all benefit from trying to understand one another, trying to be kinder, and making everyday life just a little bit easier when we're dealing with so many other difficulties and so many other uncertainties. 70% of adults have experienced some type of traumatic event at least once in their lives. That is 223.4 million people. And if you think about it, we have all lived through a traumatic event, which was the pandemic. And if you think about all of those kids who went through that, they're going to one day grow up to be adults, and they're going to have that trauma with them. By being proactive and educating ourselves, building those empathy muscles, right, we can build stronger relationships with people, with the communities we serve. We can hopefully try to create safer spaces and rebuild trust. When we do those things, our communities thrive, we have less negative interactions, and we're ultimately, hopefully, going to feel better about having to go into our jobs, and we're going to feel less resistance when we know we're walking into a safer, more, comfortable space. And I do want to take a moment and acknowledge that there are some people you do not need to be kind to. Truly, if someone is inches from your face screaming, right, or yelling at you, if someone is being racist, or they're being sexist or queer phobic, maybe they're being really ableist towards you, you do not need to show them kindness. While right customer service is part of our work jobs, it is the #1 job for you to preserve yourself. It's a whole other presentation to talk about how to handle people who are seeking confrontation. But I really just want to acknowledge that I'm not trying to tell you to smile through it all and to, just take it, with a good humor. That's not what I'm saying. If someone is being difficult or making you feel uncomfortable or causing a true disruption, you can handle that in the way that you feel best. But if you can try to come at things more openly, with more understanding, sometimes you can also see, oh, that person is having this outburst because X, Y, and Z. But it is not part of your job to be kind to someone who is seeking to harm you, whether that be physical violence or, words or emotional violence. So please remember that. So this is my last sort of slide here, and these are some last thoughts, and then I can't wait to hear your questions and talk with you, but I'm going to leave you at least with this. Empathy and being empathetic and even being kind, these are learned skills that you have to work on every day, and you're not going to get it right every time. You're not. It's impossible. We're not perfect beings. You're going to slip up and you're going to make mistakes. That's an important thing to embrace, right? In the beginning, I asked you all to think of that time, and I wanted you to sit with the discomfort, and I still want you to do that. I want you to recognize those times when you weren't right, when you didn't act right, and then think about how you can change for the next time, how you can change the way that you engage with people. And I'm going to leave you here with these final thoughts, with these phrases. I am really big into like mantras and affirmations. You can't see it here, but on my wall next to me, there's all these reminders to myself written on sticky notes to help me jog my brain from everything to, I've got you will get through this, which is an important thing to remember. And then there's another one here that's right above my computer that says intersectionality matters. So I think that I hope that these phrases will maybe be something you can like write down or keep in the forefront of your mind when you engage with people and everybody, right? These are maybe library related, but they're going to help you with any time you have to talk to a person. I hope that they will encourage you to reframe, that they will remind you to be curious and to listen attentively, and hopefully to help you consciously check yourself and to be non-judgmental. So these phrases we have is, you do not know what has happened to someone before they walk through your library doors. Assume everyone is trying their best, right? Including you. You cannot expect others to engage in a behavior you cannot engage in yourself. So these are my final thoughts here. I'm going to say a really big thank you to letting me open up this amazing conference and to get in a conversation with you. And I can't wait to hear your questions and to finally go back and read the chat. I've been trying to keep my eyes off of it for now, but I'm excited to see what you are all talking about in there.
Thank you so much, Emma Karen. So I do have a couple of questions, so I'm going to jump right into it. The first question I have, I just wanted to go back a little bit, and you talked about setting boundaries. So the question was, how do you set boundaries for the people, not necessarily customers, the people that manage you or the ones that you report to?
Yeah, that is a big one. And it's one that I think we often think we can't do, right? Like, because we're below them, we're not allowed to set the tone. We have to let them set the tone. But that's not true. That is really not true. I think you can do it in the moment when something happens. So if they call you after 6 p.m., you can text back, say, I actually don't answer my phone after 6 p.m. We'll talk about this on Thursday or whenever the next time you're in the office. You can also say, I need to have a conversation with you, supervisor. Let's set up a time. Let's sit down, and you can present them with, these are the boundaries that I have in terms of my work. You can lay it out very formally. Some people, that's helpful to them, right? To kind of do before something happens. For me, I do find it kind of easier because I don't remember all of them all the time, to do it as something comes up. But it is absolutely within your right to set a boundary with a supervisor. You are not beholden to them. They are not kings or gods. They are there to help you work better. And in order for that to happen, they need to know how you work. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. So the next question I have, the resources on the Padlet were great. Are there any specific people or accounts that you follow that have helped you reinforce these ideas? Like for boundary setting, I found Nidra Glover Tawab, hopefully I'm pronouncing that, on Instagram would be really helpful.
Yeah, this is actually something I realized I should add to the Padlet, is like different social media accounts that I follow, because I can't ever remember their names when I need to. I'm trying to look right now on my phone. One of them is accountability mapping. Accountability is something I'm really trying to learn a lot more about and engage with now. This idea of, right, we make mistakes. That's okay. Apologize and figure out how to make reparations or to repair the harm that you've caused. It's a really basic thing that, again, no one really teaches you how to make an apology, right? When you're a little kid, your mom might be like, you did this thing, you have to go say sorry, but maybe they don't explain why you say sorry. And you just kind of go, I'm sorry. Like, that's not an apology when you're an adult. You have to be willing to say, I am sorry for this thing that I did. Here's what I'm going to do differently in order for it to be like a true apology, be true, holding yourself truly accountable. So accountability mapping is one of the first ones I can think of. Anything and Everything by Miriam Kaba is just phenomenal. Her work on transformative justice and prison abolition is one of the things that has really set me on the path that I'm on. And the reading list that I have included in there is some things about transformative justice and restorative justice and prison abolition, because those thoughts are actually what we need to understand in order to create more safer, comfortable, trusting environments. Because of this idea of like, okay, well, if we say we don't want punishment anymore, whether that be prison or banning a library patron. What are we going to put in that place? And that comes down to learning principles of deep community building, deep trust building, deep accountability. And that's a lot that Mariam Kaba talks about. But I can, of course, now I'm like struggling to find on my phone all of these different accounts. And I don't want to take up too much time scrolling. So I will make a list and I will add it to the Padlet. But those are two. I love accountability mapping. Mia Mingus too also talks a lot about apologies. They're great to follow. And Adrienne Marie Brown is just fabulous on the internet, does an amazing job of posting memes that somehow have this like deep, way deeper psychological introspection to it that you never would have thought. So she's great too, or they're great too.
Thank you for that. And I guess that ties into another question that we have, the resources that you mentioned earlier. So I believe it was someone dropped in the chat the resources that you gave earlier. And also the Padlet has a lot of things on there. So I just wanted to mention that. If there's any other resources you want to throw in now, that was our next question.
Yeah, the Padlet is also growing. One of the things that I love about a Padlet is that you can keep adding to it. So I hope that, these were the things that I used when I was making this presentation mostly. So I just kind of kept it like to that. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, oh, but I should add this, or I should add this. So in the slides too, there is a reading list that I have, which I'm also slowly putting into the Padlet in terms of resources. But I would say one of the best resources I can give you that isn't in a way a true resource is to get out of your comfort zone. And that could be a lot of different things. That could be maybe you are not a documentary person. You just you can't get into them. You don't like them. But a really good place for you to maybe start on whatever journey you want to go on is to find a documentary about something you don't know about. And it doesn't have to be about people. It could be about sheep farming in New Zealand, whatever it is. Because I think documentaries, they're about people and they're about information and they're about learning and changing and things that you don't know about. So if you're not a documentary person, maybe try to get into that sphere, find that one that sounds interesting to you and use that as a resource to learn something you don't know, maybe about a person you don't know or a culture you don't know. Same thing with podcasts. I was not a podcast person. And now I love a podcast because I found the ones that really suit me. And a lot of them are about investigative journalism. And a lot of them are also about, I really love Ear Hustle, which is a podcast made by incarcerated folks at San Quentin. So you get to hear their stories about being inside. And it's just fascinating. I mean, some of it is very hard to listen to, but it was just a way for me to say, okay, I consider myself a prison abolitionist, but I don't get to interact a lot with people who are incarcerated. How can I do that? Or I can listen to this podcast that's created by them. So often we think of resources, right, as a web page or a LibGuide or whatever.
Book.
Yeah, book, exactly. But it could be a social media account. It could be a pop culture show. I mean, I feel like I learned so much by watching the new Miss Marvel, which is not meant for that, but I learned a lot more about a culture that I don't know that much about, and it was fun to watch. So resources can be anything if you kind of open your eyes wide enough to see them that way.
I think I'm going to take a page out of your book because I'm not a podcast person. I'm anti-podcast. But that'll be something that'll get me out of my comfort zones because, those are live people with the actual experiences. So I might take a page out of that book. So the next question I have here is actually one of my own. You mentioned, when you have these negative experiences, do you have any tips to move forward with someone that you've already had a negative experience with? Because you still have to move forward and help them, but you might have had this interaction in the past that wasn't so great.
Yeah, I think this can be where the self-care part comes in, and recognizing that self-care is a lot of things, right? So I have, whether a patron or coworker, where every interaction is going to be difficult, that it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter how nice you are, or if you ignore them, or it's always going to be frustrating. And you have to figure out what is going to support you to get you through it. So I wear my headphones at work a lot, which I don't love when I'm, in the office, but because, hearing other people chattering, it can be really distracting to me. I know that trying to ask them for the 500th time, hey, could we keep it down, is not going to go anywhere. So I just wear the headphones. It's so much easier. I just put them on and I move past it. Or if I know I see that patron come in, I say, oh, he's going to ask me the same question for the 500th time in a row. Take a deep breath. I think about, I don't know what's in this man's life. Maybe he just doesn't really have anybody else to talk with. I know the conversation is going to go the same way. I know I've already written this down for him, but this is just what he needs right now. So I'm going to go into that. And then when I get back off of the desk, I'm going to do a little stretch out, shake it out a little bit, and just kind of let it roll through me. These, of course, are not the most extreme cases. If maybe there is a patron who, let's be real, patrons stalk us. That's a thing that happens, or they can harass us, and there can be limited things we can do. But, so for that, it could be, I know my exit strategy. If they try to come up and talk to me, or I have a bad, right, they yell at me, they have a bad interaction, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go outside and I'm going to walk around the building, or I am going to pull out that emergency chocolate stash that I have in my desk, or I'm going to, like I said, I'm big on affirmation. So I even have them on my desk at work. I'm going to look at the affirmation that says, you are doing your best. And I'm going to say, I am doing my best. And I know I started out feeling like all of this is very woo-woo and crystal healing energy, whatever. And that might put us off, but it's really not. It's being kind to yourself. It's getting in connected with what you need, what makes you feel good, because you are the most important. You're so important. You are the best. And you have to find what's going to work for you, what's going to help you in whatever situation, because you cannot control other people. As much as I would like to believe that you can, you can't. You can ask someone to respect your boundaries, but you cannot, you can't control if they do or not, if that makes sense. So you have to come up with your own solutions, your own soothers, your own plan of action. And sometimes that could be really formal, right? You sit down with your piece of paper and you write it all out, or it can just be, okay, that coworker comes up to me and we're already engaging badly. And then after they leave, you could say, what do I need right now? What's the thing that I need that'll make me feel better? And you can do more in the moment.
And I think that kind of ties into, the next question, not question, but the next comment. Ellen popped in that we should emphasize their best, because that their best may be what you get is all they have to offer at that time.
Very, very true. Yeah. And I think too, someone in another presentation, right, said something about don't try not to focus on the person, try to focus on the situation, right? It's you might see someone coming in and you might have a preconceived notion of them. Try to let that go and focus on what it is that it's happening, what they're asking, or what's going on. And it's not easy. It really does take practice. I mean, I've been thinking about this stuff for a long time, but I won't lie, I don't think I've really engaged in it thoroughly and methodically until, maybe the last 5 years, and I'm still figuring it out. And it's never too late to start. It's never too late to try to start and figure these things out and to redirect our thinking. The most important thing is that we try at least to engage in it, and don't give up after the first week, right? Even with skincare, I always think about skincare, medications, they take about 3 weeks before they really work. So try at least for 3 weeks before you decide something isn't working for you or you want to try a different solution.
Thank you for that. So I think, okay, the next question I have is from Janae. Do you have any book recommendations or those who are more readers rather than YouTubers or podcasters as resources?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are in the
In the Padlet.
yes, but I will tell you, I just sort of finished reading Social Empathy, The Art of Understanding Others by Elizabeth A. Siegel. And that was one of the ones that kind of like I had known about social empathy, this idea of like broader applications. But this was one that I thought was really good because it was like scientific, but also from personal stories. So that's a really good one. Some parts of it I did feel were like I had to slog through it, but the book is filled with little note tags and things to think about later. So that's a really good one. How We Show Up by Mia Birdsong is one I'm still actually working through, but it's all about this idea of what is community and how do we build community. So that's a really excellent one. I think I took it out from the library and I read like 4 pages and was like, oh no, I got to get a personal copy because all I want to do is highlight and underline and write in this. Beyond Survival, which is edited by, I'm going to absolutely butcher their names, even though I've tried so many times, Leah Lakshmi Pebisna Sariminahasa. So bad, I'm so sorry. And Eris Dixon. This is all about transformative justice, but it is from all these different perspectives. It gives you like examples of like personal examples of times that we've engaged in transformative justice, but then also like worksheets and ideas and further reading lists. So it's very practical, which I love a good book on theory, but at some point I'm just like, just tell me what to do. How do I do this? So that's good. We Do This Till We Free Us by Miriam Kaba.
Repeat that title for me.
Yeah, We Do This Till
Okay.
We Free Us by Miriam Kaba. It's about prison abolition and transformative justice, but it's very personal, I would say, like almost spiritual, philosophical, and it gets at away from a lot of the more academicness and more into like, what is this in real life? She's just very inspiring. So those are, I think, good places to start because actually the last one I'll talk about too is The Little Book of Restorative Justice, which is by Catherine Evans and Dorothy Van Deering. There's actually a whole series of these like little books of restorative justice in different places, but this one, oh, sorry, I should have said Little Book of Restorative Justice in Education. Sorry, my bad. Talks about a lot of the ideas of what I think is useful in the library of like, we see these people every day, we interact with them every day, talking about working with kids, but also with adults, and talks the basic idea of like understanding that every human being deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, and how that is like, that's the basic ground that we have to build from and where we come from. And it is a literal little book. It's very short. And there is also, I think, a general little book of restorative justice and all those things. But the education one, for some reason, just kind of clicked a little bit more for me personally and professionally. So those are some good places to start, I think.
Thank you. And thank you for our, back of the house support. They have listed the titles of those books that you've all mentioned. So be sure to check out the chat if you didn't get to jot those down. And I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. I have one more here. Cooper says they're interested in the diagram you put up during your presentation about emotions. It was a circular diagram, and they were just wondering what book did that come from?
So those are not.
And I'm sure that's on the Padlet, right? Sorry.
Absolutely, it's all there. But so those are actually not ones I found in books. That was the emotions wheel. I was doing a zine workshop for this group, relationship abuse prevention program, which is here in New York, and they work with teens to help them recognize relationship abuse and things like that. And they asked me to come do a zine workshop with them, and I wanted something that would help them to determine like what they were feeling when they were feeling it. And I literally typed in like explanation of feelings, and that was something that came up. So that was the first time that I had ever seen it. So I just found them on the web. I think that Dr. Robert Plutchik's Theory of Emotions is a book, but I have not read it. I have only sort of read things about it online. And Dr. Gloria Wilcox, that feelings wheel, there is in the Padlet a sort of like printable little packet that has information about the wheel, and I think its development and kind of how to use it with some guiding questions. So they probably are in, I would say probably less a book and probably more like, journal articles, because these are coming from practitioners and academics, which I'm sure you could find. I tried to link things also in my slides and in the Padlet, but as far as I know, there may not be a book specifically, but there are resources explaining where it comes from and who wrote it and how to use them. So yeah, so those are definitely there.
Thank you so much, Emma Karen. I think it's about time for us to wrap up, but I want to say thank you, give you a huge thank you for your presentation, and thank all the presenters for joining us today. It was an excellent presentation, and if you can, as well as everyone else, please join us for our next conference session entitled Libraries 101 for Paraprofessionals, and that will be starting at 1 o'clock.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you. See you later, everyone.
Bye. Have a great conference.
Thank you.